My father bought my sister a house, and she sold it in 6 months to pay for champagne and designer bags. Then she moved into my little blue house, the one I worked 10 years for, and sat on my couch with a smile that made my blood run cold. She said, "Clara, give me your house, or I will destroy everything you love." My father begged me to forgive her. My own blood chose her over me, so I did something no one expected, something that would tear our family apart forever. And I do not regret a single second of it. My name is Clara Bennett, and this is my story, but let me start at the beginning. My father, John Bennett, was the kind of man who built things, not houses, though he could do that too. He built futures. He worked as a construction foreman for 30 years, coming home with calloused hands and a tired smile. He was not a rich man, not by the standards of the world. We never had a vacation in Florida or a car that was less than 7 years old. But my father had a different kind of wealth. He had a heart so big that it sometimes seemed to fill up our whole little house on Maple Street in Springfield, Ohio. My mother, Ellen, died when I was 8 years old. Cancer took her slowly, cruelly, like a thief that stole her laugh first, then her hair, then her strength, and finally her life. I remember holding her hand in the hospital, her fingers like dry twigs, and promising her I would be good. I would be brave. I would take care of Dad. My older sister, Vanessa, was 10 when Mom died. Even then, there was something different about her. While I cried into my pillow every night for a year, Vanessa seemed to dry her tears after a week and then never speak of Mom again. She was beautiful, you see. Even at 10, she had that golden hair and those green eyes that made people stop and stare. People would say, "Oh, that Vanessa, she's going to be a model." And they would pat my head and say, "And Clara is so sweet." Sweet. That was the word they used for plain girls with brown hair and brown eyes and a quiet way of standing in corners. I learned early that sweetness is the compliment people give you when they cannot find anything else to admire. But I did not mind. I had my father. In the years after Mom died, Dad and I became a team. He would wake me up at 5 in the morning with a cup of hot chocolate, even in summer. He taught me how to fix a leaky faucet and how to patch a hole in drywall. On Saturdays, we would go to the hardware store, and he would let me pick out a new plant for the tiny garden behind our house. I chose marigolds because they were bright and stubborn and did not need much to grow. Just like him, I thought, just like us. He never remarried. He said his heart only had room for one great love, and he had already found it. But he poured all that leftover love into Vanessa and me. The problem was, Vanessa had a way of pouring it right back out and onto herself. By the time Vanessa turned 22, she had been through 3 colleges, 2 fiancés, and a series of jobs that never seemed to last longer than a season. She said the world was too small for her. She said she needed to travel, to experience life, to find herself. Dad always nodded and said, "You'll find your way, sweetheart," and he meant it. He believed in her the way you believe the sun will rise, even on cloudy days. I, on the other hand, was the practical one. I went to community college while working as a receptionist at a dental office. I saved every penny. I bought my first car with cash, a beat-up Honda Civic that coughed black smoke but never left me stranded. I was 25 when I finally saved enough for a down payment on a small house of my own, a 2-bedroom fixer-upper on the edge of town. It had peeling wallpaper and a kitchen from the 1970s and a porch that leaned to the left. But it was mine. I painted the front door blue, planted marigolds in the yard, and felt, for the first time since Mom died, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a gray Tuesday in October. The leaves were falling, and the air smelled like wood smoke and endings. Dad called me and said, "Come over for dinner. I have something to tell you." His voice was strange, light and heavy at the same time, like a man carrying a secret too big for his pockets. When I got to his house, Vanessa was already there, sitting on the sofa with that smile she only wore when she had won something. She was wearing a cashmere sweater and diamond stud earrings. I had no idea where the money came from. I never did. Dad sat us down in the living room with the old brown sofa and the picture of Mom on the mantel. He looked older than I remembered. His hands, those strong hands that had lifted steel beams and built walls, were trembling slightly as he held a manila envelope. He said, "Girls, I'm not getting any younger. I've been thinking about what I want to leave behind. I've worked hard all my life, and I've managed to save up some money. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to do something for each of you." He opened the envelope and pulled out 2 sets of papers. One was for a house, a little bungalow on Sycamore Street, just a few blocks from his own house. The other was a smaller stack of papers, which turned out to be a savings bond. He looked at Vanessa first. "Vanessa," he said, "I know you've had a hard time finding your footing. You've always dreamed of a place of your own, so I bought you the bungalow on Sycamore Street. It's fully paid for. It's yours." Vanessa's eyes went wide, then shiny with tears. She threw her arms around Dad and cried, "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. I will never forget this. I will make it so beautiful, you'll see." And for a moment, I believed her. I really did. Then Dad turned to me. "Clara," he said, "you've always been my rock. You never asked for anything. So I'm giving you this savings bond. It's not as big as the house, but it's a start. And I know you'll use it wisely." He handed me an envelope. I opened it and saw the number, $10,000. It was a lot of money to me, but it was not a house. A house in our town cost at least $120,000. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Dad. I love you." And I meant it. I always meant it. But here is the thing about that day that I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times. When Dad gave Vanessa the house, she did not ask about me. She did not say, "What about Clara?" She did not look at me with even a flicker of sisterly concern. She just clutched those papers to her chest like a child holding a stolen toy. And when I congratulated her, she said, "Oh, it's just a little bungalow, nothing fancy." But her smile said everything else. I told myself to be happy for her. I told myself that Dad's love was not measured in dollars. But I am only human, and I could not help but think about all the years I had stayed close to home, all the times I had driven Dad to his doctor's appointments, all the nights I had sat with him when he could not sleep, missing Mom. I never asked for a reward, but somewhere deep in my heart, I had believed that Dad saw me, that he knew who had been there and who had not. That night, I went home to my little blue-doored house, sat on my leaning porch, and cried until the moon was high and cold. Then I wiped my face, went inside, and made myself a cup of tea. I decided I would not let this break me. I had never been the kind of girl who breaks. For 6 months, everything seemed fine. Vanessa moved into the bungalow on Sycamore Street. She painted the walls pale pink and bought new furniture, a white sofa, a glass coffee table, a chandelier that hung in the dining room like a frozen waterfall. Dad helped her with the repairs, of course. He spent every weekend there, fixing the plumbing, replacing the windows, building a deck in the backyard. I helped too, sometimes. I painted the trim and planted flowers in the garden. I even brought over a batch of my famous chocolate chip cookies for her housewarming party. She served champagne, because of course she did. And she showed off the house to her friends, who oohed and awed and said, "You are so lucky, Vanessa." And she would say, "I know, Daddy is the best, but I noticed things, small things at first." The for sale sign appeared in her yard only 3 months after she moved in. When I asked her about it, she laughed and said, "Oh, Clara, don't be so dramatic. I'm just testing the market. You know how real estate is." I didn't believe her, but I didn't push. Dad was the one who should have pushed, but Dad never pushed Vanessa. He just smiled and said, "She'll figure it out. She always does." 2 months later, the house was sold. I heard about it from a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who called me in a huff and said, "Did you hear about your sister? She sold that beautiful house to a young couple from Columbus. Got top dollar, I heard, over $150,000. I was stunned. I called Vanessa immediately. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice all sugar and steel. "Oh, hi, Clara, what's up?" I said, "Vanessa, did you sell the house?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I did. It was an investment. I'm going to use the money to travel, to invest in myself. Dad understands. Dad always understands." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, staring at the cracked linoleum floor. The house that Dad had bought with his hard-earned money, the house he had poured his weekends into, the house that was supposed to be Vanessa's forever home, was gone. And Vanessa was already posting pictures on social media from a resort in Cancun. I went to see Dad that evening. He was sitting in his recliner, watching an old Western on television. The room smelled like coffee and loneliness. I sat on the arm of the chair and said, "Dad, I heard about the house." He did not look at me. He just said, "She needed the money, Clara. She's young. She has to live her life. I said, Dad, you worked 30 years for that money. You gave her a home, and she sold it in 6 months. He finally turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not disappointment. It was exhaustion. He said, What do you want me to do? Go after her. She's my daughter. I love her. I said, I know you do, Dad, but love has to work both ways. He patted my hand and said, You've always been the strong one, Clara. You'll be fine. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, being the strong one doesn't mean I don't hurt. Being the strong one doesn't mean I don't need a father to see me. But I just kissed his forehead and went home. That was the beginning of the unraveling. Over the next 2 years, Vanessa burned through the money from the house. She went to Paris and Rome. She bought a designer handbag that cost more than my car. She leased a shiny red Audi and crashed it within 3 months. She moved into a luxury apartment downtown, then got evicted when she stopped paying rent. Through it all, she called Dad every week, sometimes in tears, sometimes in anger, always with her hand out. Dad, I need $5,000 for a business opportunity. Dad, I'm behind on my credit card payments. Dad, can you co-sign a loan for me? And Dad, God bless him, said yes more often than he should have. He dipped into his retirement savings. He took out a second mortgage on his own house. He even borrowed money from his brother, my Uncle Mike, who warned him, John, that girl is going to drain you dry. But Dad just said, She's my flesh and blood, Mike. I can't turn my back on her. Meanwhile, I kept working at the dental office. I got a promotion to office manager. I fixed up my little house one room at a time, learning to tile the bathroom floor from YouTube videos and refinishing the kitchen cabinets with my own 2 hands. I started dating a nice man named David, a high school history teacher with kind eyes and a quiet laugh. He liked that I could fix a sink and bake a pie. He liked that I did not need saving. We talked about the future, about maybe getting married, about maybe having kids. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt like maybe the scales were finally balancing. But Vanessa was not done. She had spent every dollar from the house, every loan Dad had co-signed, every favor from every relative who still answered her calls. And now she was desperate. One night, close to midnight, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. She was crying, the kind of crying that sounds like a broken animal. Clara, she sobbed, Clara, I need your help. I'm going to lose everything. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. What happened? I asked. She told me a story about a business partner who had cheated her, an investment that had gone bad, a series of bad choices that had left her with nothing. I did not believe half of it, but I listened. Then she said the words that would change everything. Clara, I need a place to stay, just for a little while. Can I stay with you? I hesitated. David was asleep next to me. Our life was peaceful. Bringing Vanessa into it felt like inviting a hurricane, but she was my sister. And Dad had always said, family takes care of family. So I said, okay, for a few weeks, but you have to get back on your feet. She promised. She swore. She thanked me with so much emotion that I almost believed she had changed. She moved in a week later. She brought 3 suitcases, a makeup case the size of a small suitcase, and a sour attitude that she tried to hide behind a smile. At first, she was helpful. She did the dishes without being asked. She complimented my curtains and my choice of paint. She even made dinner one night, though it was just frozen lasagna and a bagged salad. David was polite but wary. He had heard the stories. He squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Be careful." I nodded. I was always careful. But careful is not the same as protected. After 2 weeks, Vanessa started to change. She complained that the walls were thin, that the neighborhood was too quiet, that my furniture was outdated. She started coming home late, smelling of wine and expensive perfume. She left her things all over the living room, her designer shoes in the middle of the floor, her silk robes draped over the sofa. I asked her to clean up, and she rolled her eyes and said, "You are so uptight, Clara. Live a little." I bit my tongue. I thought of Dad. I thought of family. Then, one afternoon, I came home from work early because I had forgotten my laptop charger. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the living room and saw Vanessa sitting on my sofa, holding a stack of papers. She was smiling, that wide, greedy smile I had not seen since the day Dad gave her the house. She looked up and said, "Oh, good, you're here. We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I set down my bag and said, "What is it, Vanessa?" She held up the papers. These are the deed and the mortgage documents for your house, Clara. I did some research. You owe about $60,000 on it still. The market value is around $180,000. I said so. She leaned forward, her green eyes glittering. So I think you should give me this house. I laughed. I could not help it. It was such an absurd thing to say that my brain just short-circuited and laughter came out instead of words. But Vanessa did not laugh. She stood up and walked toward me, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own sister. This is not a joke, Clara, she said. I have nothing. No money, no home, no future. You have everything. A good job, a good man, a beautiful house. Don't you think it's time you shared? I said, Vanessa, are you insane? Dad gave you a house, you sold it. You spent every penny. That is not my fault. She shook her head slowly, like I was a child who did not understand. Dad gave me a house, yes, but Dad also gave you the savings bond. You used it for your down payment, didn't you? So really, this house is partly Dad's money too, and Dad would want you to help me. Dad would want you to be a good sister. My hands were shaking. I said, Vanessa, get out. Get out of my house. She did not move. She just stood there, blocking the doorway to the kitchen, her silhouette thin and sharp against the afternoon light. She said, I'm not leaving until you agree to sign over the house to me. And if you don't, I will make your life a living hell. I know things about you, Clara. I can make Dad think you've been stealing from him. I can tell David that you've been seeing someone else. I can ruin you, and I will. You know I will. I stared at her. I searched her face for any sign of the little girl who had once held my hand at Mom's funeral. But that girl was gone. In her place was a stranger, beautiful and hollow, with eyes that had no bottom. I took a step back. I said, you need help, Vanessa, real help. This is not normal. She laughed, a short, ugly sound. Normal is for people like you, Clara, people who are happy with a little blue door and a leaning porch. I'm not normal, I'm better, and I always get what I want. She walked past me, brushing my shoulder with hers and headed for the guest bedroom. Over her shoulder, she said, you have 24 hours to think about it. Then the real fun begins. The door slammed. I stood in my living room, alone, with the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at the picture of Mom on my shelf. Mom had been quiet like me. Mom had been kind. But Mom had also been strong. She had fought cancer for 2 years without a single complaint. She had held on long enough to see me start first grade. I touched the frame and whispered, Mom, what do I do? But the photograph did not answer. Pictures never do. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed next to David, who was snoring softly, and I turned everything over in my mind. Vanessa's threat was not empty. She had a way of manipulating people, of twisting the truth until it became whatever she needed it to be. If she went to Dad, he might believe her. Dad had always believed the best of her, even when the evidence said otherwise. And David loved me, but he was also a reasonable man. If Vanessa planted a seed of doubt, it might grow. I could not let that happen. But what could I do? I was not rich. I did not have lawyers or private investigators. I was just Clara, the sweet one, the plain one, the one who fixed things instead of breaking them. And then, around 3 in the morning, I had an idea. It was not a revenge idea, not yet. It was a protection idea. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand how Vanessa had spent every dollar, how she had manipulated Dad, how she had burned through every relationship and every opportunity. I needed the truth. And the truth, I realized, was not something you found. It was something you built, piece by piece, like a wall. The next morning, I went to see Dad. I did not tell him about Vanessa's demand. Not yet. I wanted to see where he stood. I found him in his garden, planting tulip bulbs for the spring. He looked frail. His hands shook more than before, and his face was ashen. I sat on the ground next to him and said, Dad, can we talk about Vanessa? He sighed and set down his trowel. What about her, Clara? I said, do you know how much money she has taken from you? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I stopped counting. It's easier that way. I said, Dad, she sold the house you gave her. She spent everything. And now she's asking for more. She's asking for my house. He looked at me then and his eyes were wet. She asked you for your house? I nodded. He shook his head slowly. I raised her wrong, Clara. I thought if I gave her everything, she would feel loved. But she never felt enough. Nothing was ever enough for her. And now I've hurt you, the daughter who never asked for anything. I took his hand. It was cold and rough. Dad, I said, it's not too late, but you have to stop. You have to stop giving her money. You have to stop believing her lies. He pulled his hand away and looked back at the tulip bulbs. I can't, Clara. She's my daughter. I made a promise to your mother on her deathbed. I promised to take care of both of you. I said, even if taking care of one means destroying the other. He did not answer. He just kept planting, one bulb at a time, into the cold October ground. I left his house feeling heavier than I had when I arrived. Dad was not going to help me. He was too deep in his own guilt, too tangled in his own love for Vanessa. I was on my own, so I went to the one place I never thought I would go. I went to see Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike was my father's older brother, a retired accountant with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. He had never liked Vanessa. He called her a black hole in human form. But he had also stopped coming to family dinners because he could not stand to watch Dad ruin himself for her. He lived in a small condo across town, surrounded by books and the smell of pipe tobacco. When he opened the door and saw me, his eyebrows went up. Clara, he said, this is a surprise. Come in, you look like you've seen a ghost. I sat on his leather sofa and told him everything. The house, the sale, the demands, Vanessa's threat, Dad's helplessness. Uncle Mike listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his fingers on the armrest. He said, you know what you need to do, don't you? I shook my head. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You need to fight back, Clara. Not with anger, not with violence, with facts, with records, with the truth. Vanessa has been stealing from this family for years. She just never put a gun to anyone's head. But stealing is stealing. And now she's threatening you. That's a crime. I said, I don't want to send my sister to jail, Uncle Mike. I just want her to leave me alone. He leaned forward. Then you need to make her afraid. You need to show her that you are not an easy target. And you need to protect your father from her, even if he doesn't want to be protected. Uncle Mike spent the next 3 hours teaching me how to track money. He showed me how to request financial records, how to find property transactions, how to trace loans and debts. He taught me about something called a forensic audit, which is just a fancy way of saying following the paper trail. He said, Vanessa is not clever. She's greedy. Greedy people always leave tracks because they think no one will ever look. By the time I left Uncle Mike's condo, I had a plan. It was not a revenge plan, not yet. It was a discovery plan. I was going to find out everything about Vanessa's finances. And then, when I had the full picture, I was going to decide what to do next. But here is the thing about looking into the darkness. Sometimes the darkness looks back. And what I found over the next few weeks made my blood run cold. I started with the house on Sycamore Street. A public records search showed that Vanessa had sold it for $152,000. That was the good news. The bad news was that she had spent it all within 8 months. Bank records I was able to obtain through a friend of Uncle Mike's who worked at a local credit union showed withdrawals and purchases that were staggering. $10,000 at a Louis Vuitton store, $25,000 for a lease on the Audi, $40,000 for the trip to Europe, all first-class flights and 5-star hotels. There were also mysterious transfers to accounts I did not recognize, accounts in names that were not Vanessa's. One was to a man named Derek Shaw. Another was to a company called Lux Holdings, which turned out to be a front for a series of online gambling sites. My sister, it seemed, had a gambling problem, and not just a small one. In 1 month alone, she had lost over $30,000 on blackjack and slot machines. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This was not just irresponsibility. This was a sickness. And Dad had been funding it for years without even knowing. But the worst discovery came when I looked into the loans Dad had co-signed. There were 7 of them, totaling over $200,000. And every single one was in default. The banks were coming after Dad. They had already started garnishing his small pension. His house, the house where I had grown up, the house with the marigolds and the picture of Mom on the mantel, was at risk of foreclosure. Vanessa had not just burned through her own money. She had burned through Dad's future, and Dad had never told me. He had been too ashamed, too proud, too afraid that I would blame him. I did not blame him, I blamed her. And for the first time, I felt something other than sadness or frustration. I felt rage. A cold, clear, righteous rage that settled into my bones like winter. I confronted Vanessa that night. She was sitting on my sofa, scrolling through her phone, wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I stood in front of her and said, I know about the gambling. I know about Derek Shaw. I know about the loans, about the foreclosure, about everything. She looked up slowly, her face unreadable. Then she smiled. It was a thin, cruel smile. Good for you, Clara. You finally grew a spine. But knowing and proving are two different things. And even if you prove it, what are you going to do? Call the police? I'm your sister. Dad will never forgive you, and neither will anyone else. You'll be the girl who destroyed her own family. I said, no, Vanessa, you destroyed this family. I just collected the evidence. She stood up, and for a moment we were face to face. She was taller than me, always had been, but I did not step back. She said, what do you want? Money. I don't have any. The house? I already told you I need it. I said, you're not getting my house. And you're not getting another penny from Dad. I'm going to stop you, Vanessa, one way or another. She laughed, that ugly laugh again. You can't stop me. No one can. And then she walked out the front door, leaving it open behind her. The cold October air rushed in. I stood there, watching her get into a taxi, and I knew that the time for discovery was over. It was time for action. But what action? I could not go to the police without evidence of a specific crime. Threatening me was not enough, not without witnesses. I could not sue her because she had no money. I could not convince Dad to cut her off because his heart was a prison of guilt. I felt trapped, like a bird flying against a window. And then David, my quiet, kind David, gave me the key. He found me crying in the kitchen late one night, the records spread out on the table. He put his arms around me and said, Clara, you're trying to fight her with logic. But Vanessa doesn't live in a world of logic. She lives in a world of image. She cares more about how she looks than about what she is, so attack the image. I pulled back and looked at him. What do you mean? He said, you have all this documentation. You know about the gambling, the lies, the manipulation. Why not share it? Not with the police, with the people who matter to her, her friends, her social media followers, the family. Let them see who she really is. I shook my head. That feels like revenge, David. I don't want to be that person. He took my hands. It's not revenge, Clara. It's exposure. It's protecting others from being hurt by her. And it's the only language she understands. I thought about it for 3 days. I prayed. I talked to Mom's picture. I walked through my garden, touching each marigold, remembering that Dad had taught me to grow them. And finally, I made a decision. I was not going to destroy Vanessa. That was not in my nature. But I was going to arm myself, and I was going to give her one chance. One chance to walk away, to get help, to leave Dad and me alone. If she refused, then I would use the truth as my shield. I called her and asked her to meet me at Dad's house. She agreed, probably thinking I was going to cave. When I arrived, Dad was already there, sitting in his recliner, looking lost. Uncle Mike was there too, at my request. And Vanessa swept in 20 minutes late, wearing a red dress and heels, like she was going to a party instead of a family meeting. She looked at Uncle Mike and smirked. Oh, the accountant is here. Am I being audited? Uncle Mike did not smile. Sit down, Vanessa. She sat, crossing her legs and tapping her foot. I stood in the middle of the room, holding a folder thick with papers. I looked at Dad first. I said, Dad, I love you. That's why I'm doing this. Then I looked at Vanessa. Vanessa, you have a problem. You are addicted to money, to gambling, to the approval of strangers. You have hurt everyone who loves you. You have stolen from Dad. You have threatened me. And you have shown no remorse. I am giving you one chance. 1, you will admit everything to Dad. You will apologize. You will agree to get professional help for your gambling addiction. And you will leave me and my house alone forever. If you do that, I will keep all of this private. If you don't, I will share every document in this folder. I will post it online. I will send it to your former friends, your creditors, and every person who has ever lent you money. You will have nowhere to hide. Vanessa stared at me. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the same clock that had ticked through every dinner, every holiday, every ordinary day of my childhood. Then Vanessa did something I did not expect. She started to cry, real tears, not the crocodile kind. They ran down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. She looked at Dad and said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to feel like I was enough, like I was worthy. I wanted to be special. Dad started to cry too. He held out his arms, and Vanessa went to him, and they hugged like they had not hugged since Mom died. I stood there, holding my folder, feeling like the villain in my own story. Uncle Mike put a hand on my shoulder. He whispered, "Don't fall for it, Clara." I whispered back, "I'm not. But I have to give her this chance. For Dad." Vanessa did go to rehab. She checked into a facility in Arizona, a nice one that Dad somehow found the money for. I suspect Uncle Mike paid for it, though he never said so. She wrote letters from rehab, long, rambling letters full of apologies and promises. Dad read them every day, his face soft with hope. I read them too, but I read them differently. I looked for the cracks, the places where the old Vanessa peeked through, and I found them. In every letter, there was a question about money. Could I have a little extra for snacks? Could Dad send a care package? Could I please pay off this one small credit card so I could start fresh? Dad sent what he could. I told him to stop. He said, "She's trying, Clara. Give her time." I gave her time, 3 months to be exact. She completed the program and came home with a certificate and a smile that almost reached her eyes. She moved into a sober living house, got a job at a boutique clothing store, and started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. For a while, it seemed like the nightmare might be over. I let myself hope. That was my mistake, because Vanessa was not done with me. She was just waiting. The call came on a Tuesday, just like the first one had. It was Dad's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson again. "Clara," she said, her voice tight with worry, "you need to come to your father's house." Now, I left work early and drove as fast as I could. When I got there, I saw the sign first. A bright yellow sign stuck in the front yard. Foreclosure sale, date set. My legs went weak. I walked up the steps and into the house. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. Uncle Mike was there, pacing. And Vanessa was there too, sitting in the corner with her arms crossed and her face blank. "What happened?" I asked. Uncle Mike stopped pacing. "It was Vanessa," he said. "She took out another loan in your father's name, forged his signature, used the money to pay off her gambling debts from before rehab. The bank caught the forgery, but not before they had already processed the default. Your father's house is being seized." I turned to Vanessa. My voice came out in a whisper. "Is it true?" She did not look at me. She looked at the floor. "Yes," I said. "Why?" She finally looked up and her eyes were empty, because I needed it. And I knew Daddy would forgive me. He always does. I looked at Dad. He was crying silently, tears dripping onto the table. I knelt beside him and took his hands. "Dad," I said, "she forged your name. That's a crime. We can go to the police. We can stop the foreclosure." He shook his head. "No, Clara. No police. She's my daughter. I can't." I said, "Dad, she's going to destroy you." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than love in his eyes. I saw resignation. "Then let her," he said. "I'm too tired to fight anymore." That was the moment. That was the exact second when I stopped being the sweet, patient, understanding Clara. Something inside me snapped. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with a cold, clear determination. I stood up, looked at Vanessa, and said, "You are going to pay for this, every single penny." She laughed, that same ugly laugh. "How? You have nothing, I have nothing." "You can't squeeze blood from a stone, Clara," I said, "watch me." And I walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove to the police station. I filed a report for forgery and fraud. I provided every document I had gathered over the past year. The detective, a weary woman named Rodriguez, looked at the stack of paper and whistled. "This is extensive," she said. "You've been busy." I said, "I've been preparing." She asked, "Are you sure you want to do this? She's your sister." I said, "That's exactly why I have to do this, because if I don't, she will keep hurting people. And the next person might not survive." The arrest happened 2 days later. I was not there. Uncle Mike called me. "They picked her up at the sober living house," he said. "She was wearing a bathrobe. She screamed your name the whole way to the patrol car." I felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, no guilt. Just a vast, empty quiet, like the inside of a church after everyone has gone home. Dad did not speak to me for a month. He would not answer my calls or my visits. Mrs. Patterson told me he sat in his empty house, waiting for the foreclosure, staring at the wall. I think he blamed me. I think he blamed me for breaking the one rule he had lived by. Family never turns on family. But I had not turned on family. Family had turned on itself. I was just the one who finally called it what it was. A month later, I went to see Dad. He let me in, but he would not look at me. We sat in the living room, the same living room where he had given Vanessa the house, the same living room where Mom's picture still sat on the mantel. I said, "Dad, I need you to hear me. I did not do this to hurt you. I did this to save you. She was going to take everything. She already took your house. She took your savings. She took your peace. If I hadn't stopped her, she would have taken your life. Not on purpose, but slowly, the way a cancer takes it." He finally looked at me. His eyes were red and swollen. "She's in jail, Clara." "My little girl is in jail." I said, "She's not a little girl anymore, Dad. She's a woman who made choices. And now she has to face the consequences." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What about the house?" I said, "I'm going to fight the foreclosure. Uncle Mike found a lawyer who specializes in elder fraud. We're going to prove that the loan was fraudulent. The house might be saved." He nodded slowly. "And Vanessa," I took a deep breath. "Vanessa will go to trial. She'll probably get probation and mandatory treatment. She's not a violent criminal, but she'll have a record. She'll have to pay restitution. And maybe, finally, she'll have to face the truth about herself." Dad reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, but it was there. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't see. I'm sorry I chose her over you." I squeezed his hand. "You didn't choose her, Dad. You chose to love her. That's not a crime. But love without boundaries is just destruction. And I won't let you be destroyed." The trial was short. Vanessa pleaded guilty to forgery and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 3 years of probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and an order to pay restitution of $120,000 to Dad. She will probably never be able to pay it. She will probably spend the rest of her life working low-wage jobs and living in small apartments and wondering where it all went wrong. I do not wish her ill, but I do not wish her well either. That part of my heart, the part that loved my sister, died somewhere along the way. Maybe it died the day she sold the house. Maybe it died the day she threatened me. Maybe it died the day I saw her empty eyes in Dad's kitchen. I do not know. What I know is this: Dad's house was saved. The lawyer, working pro bono because Uncle Mike knew someone who knew someone, got the foreclosure reversed. Dad still lives there with the marigolds in the garden and Mom's picture on the mantel. He is older now, frailer, but he smiles sometimes. He told me last week that he is proud of me. That meant more than any house ever could. David and I got married in the backyard of my little blue-doored house. We planted new marigolds that day, bright orange and yellow, and we danced under string lights until the neighbors complained about the music. I am not rich. I am not famous. I am not beautiful like Vanessa, but I am free. And freedom, I have learned, is the sweetest revenge of all, because Vanessa took everything she could from this family, but she could not take my integrity. She could not take my courage. She could not take my ability to stand in the truth, even when the truth hurt. And that, more than any house, more than any money, more than any victory in court, is the thing that will carry me for the rest of my life. So if you are out there, and you are facing a family member who is taking and never giving, hear this. Love does not mean sacrifice. Love does not mean destruction. Love means sometimes saying no. Love means sometimes walking away. Love means sometimes fighting back with nothing but the truth. You do not have to be the sweet one. You do not have to be the strong one. You just have to be the one who refuses to disappear. My name is Clara Bennett, and I am still standing.